The sun in Lagos doesn't just rise, it pushes through the smog like a witness to things better left in the dark. Simi sat on the edge of her bed in Hall 4, the springs groaning under her weight. On her laptop, the red text was a terminal diagnosis: exam clearance denied. 250,000 naira stood between her and the graduation she had bled for over 4 years. Simi lived in the corner of a room that smelled of expensive hairspray and cheap instant noodles. For 3 years, she had been the shadow in Hall 4, the girl who stayed behind to study while her roommates, Kiki and Bella, vanished into the Lagos night in tinted glass SUVs. To Simi, their lifestyle was a circus she refused to join. She believed in the dignity of the grind. But by the final semester, the grind had ground her down to nothing. Her father's retirement tip had been swallowed by a failed bank, and her school portal was a graveyard of payment-pending notifications. Kiki sighed as she zipped up a designer suitcase. Simi, how much longer are you going to do this to yourself? Your ribs are showing. Your father isn't coming to save you. Lagos doesn't recognize good girls. It only recognizes those who show up. The library is for people with time, Simi, Kiki said, not looking at her. The clinic is for people with money. Your mother is sick, your portal is locked, and you're here forming integrity. One night at the penthouse. Just dinner. Nobody is asking for your soul. Simi's resistance didn't break, it eroded. She thought of her mother's hacking cough back in the village and the shame of returning home as the girl who almost made it. Simi replied, I am not like you, Kiki. I didn't come to this university to become a trophy for old men. I have a pride to keep. Pride doesn't pay tuition. Simi. Survival does. Simi, look at your hands. Kiki said, you are scrubbing floors to buy handouts while girls with half your brain are flying to Dubai. Just come to the lounge tonight. One dinner. No strings. Just a seat at the table. Simi's refusal was her last shield. She said no on Monday. She said no on Wednesday. But by Friday, when the hostel porter threatened to throw her mattress outside for unpaid fees, the shield finally shattered. The transformation was visceral. The library girl disappeared under layers of expensive foundation and a wig that cost more than her father's monthly pension. When Simi looked in the mirror, she didn't see a scholar, she saw a stranger who looked like she belonged in the penthouses of Ikoyi. They arrived at the venue, a private lounge hidden away from the chaos of the Lagos streets. The atmosphere was heavy with the smell of imported cigars and the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice. At the head of the table sat a man they called the chairman. He didn't look like a villain, he looked like a kingmaker. He watched Simi with a predatory patience, noticing the way she fumbled with the heavy silver cutlery and the way her eyes widened at the price of a single bottle of wine. He spoke softly, telling her that it was a tragedy for a mind like hers to be wasted over a simple matter of money. As the night matured, the dinner began to reveal its true face. The laughter became louder, and the room grew smaller. Simi looked to Kiki for a way out, but her friend was busy counting a thick stack of bills under the table, her eyes cold and transactional. Simi realized then that she wasn't a guest of honor, she was the commodity. Kiki hadn't brought a friend to dinner, she had delivered a product to a buyer. The chairman didn't make a scene. He simply placed a gold-rimmed keycard on the table and waited. The silence between them felt like a physical weight. Simi retreated to the balcony, looking out at the glittering lights of the Lagos skyline, realizing that every light belonged to someone who had likely sacrificed something to be there. She thought of her mother's prayers in the village, and for a moment, she considered taking off her shoes and running into the night. Kiki joined her on the balcony, the smoke from her cigarette curling into the humid air. She told Simi that the world was going to take its pound of flesh one way or another, and it was better to be the one holding the check. She reminded Simi of the red text on the portal and the shame of a failed dream. Simi didn't cry. The tears had been replaced by a cold, numbing clarity. She understood that if she walked out now, she was walking back to nothing. If she stayed, she could be everything. With a slow, mechanical movement, Simi turned away from the railing. She walked back into the lounge, past the empty bottles and the fading music. She didn't look at Kiki, and she didn't look at the sky. She reached out and took the keycard from the table. It was a silent, absolute surrender. Monday morning arrived with a brutal sunlight. Simi sat in her usual front row seat at the lecture hall, but everything had changed. She wore a new watch and a designer bag, and when she logged into the school portal, the red text was gone. It was replaced by a bright green total paid. Simi, Kiki, and their circle, Bella and Tanya, became the Lekki Quintet. Their lives were a curated gallery of excess. They spent Tuesdays at champagne brunches where the bill exceeded a civil servant's annual salary. Weekends were spent on private jet trips to Accra or Dubai, where they draped themselves in Fendi and sipped vintage Cristal. Kiki taught her the vibration of the big girl, how to walk into a room like you owned the air everyone else was breathing. They laughed at small boys and salary earners, calling them scallywags. To them, men were not partners, they were ATMs with heartbeats. Simi's bank account swelled, and with it, her heart hardened. In the beginning, Simi meant to send money home. But then came the need for a 5 million naira Hermes Birkin to keep up appearances. Then came the rent for a penthouse in Chevy View. Whenever her brother, Chitty, called, Simi would see his 080 number on her iPhone 15 Pro Max and feel a surge of irritation. Simi, Mama's chest is worse. The doctor says we need 50K for tests, he would plead.
Simi would look at her freshly manicured nails. Chitty, I'm in a meeting. I'll send it, she'd lie, before heading into a club where she'd spray 200K on a DJ just for a shout-out. She began to view her family as a drain on her aesthetic. She blocked her father after he sent a long text questioning her source of wealth. In her mind, she had leveled up, and they were the anchors trying to pull her back into the mud of poverty. The crash began on her 23rd birthday. She was waiting for her main benefactor, the chairman, at a rooftop lounge. Instead, his driver arrived with a black bin bag. The chairman says you're getting hard around the edges, Simi. He's found someone, fresher. In that world, if you aren't an asset, you are a ghost. She turned to Kiki, but Kiki was already busy mentoring a 19-year-old freshman. Life happens, babe, Kiki said, checking her reflection. Find a new Magoo. The crash didn't just break Simi, it dismantled her. When the chairman's driver dropped that black trash bag at her feet, he wasn't just delivering her clothes, he was returning her soul in a plastic sack. Desperate for a voice that didn't sound like a transaction, she finally unblocked her brother, Chitty. The phone vibrated so hard in her hand it felt like it would shatter. The messages arrived in a chronological line of agony. Simi, Mama is asking for you. Please. Simi, we need oxygen. The hospital won't move until we pay. Just 100K. Simi, she's gone. You killed her with your silence. Simi collapsed onto her Italian marble floor. She looked at the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. The price of that jewelry could have bought her mother 10 more years, a better hospital, and the dignity of a final breath surrounded by family. Instead, it was just a cold, glittering circle of regret. The journey to the village was a descent into a nightmare. Simi hired a private car, still instinctively trying to hide from the dust behind tinted windows. But when she stepped out in front of her father's modest house, the Lagos big girl looked like a jagged piece of glass in a bowl of clay. She was wearing a custom-made black morning gown, cinched at the waist to highlight the figure she had spent millions to maintain. Her hair was a 40-inch bone-straight wig that cost more than the village clinic's annual budget. Her face was a masterpiece of sad girl makeup, but the harsh, midday sun of the village was unforgiving. It showed every crack in her armor. The villagers stopped whispering as she approached. The silence wasn't out of respect, it was out of pure, concentrated disdain. Inside the small, humid living room, the smell of cheap candles and old wood hung heavy. Her father sat in a corner, his skin looking like parchment. He didn't look up when she entered. Simi walked toward the simple wooden casket. She reached out a hand, nails painted a deep, regal burgundy, to touch the wood. Don't. The word was a whip. Her brother, Chitty, stood opposite her. He looked gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't look like the boy she used to play with, he looked like a man who had seen too much death. Chitty, I didn't know it was this bad, Simi whispered, her voice trembling. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Chitty hissed, stepping closer. The villagers crowded the windows, watching the drama. You were too busy flying to Dubai to send money for her inhaler. You were too busy living large to answer the phone while she was calling your name, gasping for air. He looked at her expensive dress, his lip curling in disgust. You look beautiful, Simi. Truly. You look like the most expensive thing in this room. But you smell like the chairman's perfume and mama's blood. Get out, Chitty, please, she's my mother too. Simi fled. She drove back to Lagos in a blur of tears that ruined her expensive lashes. The regret wasn't a phase, it became a permanent resident in her chest. The grief was a physical weight, but it was joined by something more sinister. A persistent, dry cough, the same one that killed her mother, started to rattle her chest. Her skin, once glowing like burnished gold, took on a gray, translucent tint. The expensive wig started to feel too heavy for her neck. She visited a high-end clinic, still wearing a Gucci wrap and oversized glasses to hide her sunken eyes. A male Nigerian doctor, his face a mask of professional sorrow, sat her down. He didn't see the big girl. He saw a patient. Simi, he said, sliding a lab report across the desk. You are HIV positive. And your viral load suggests it has been untreated for some time. The silence in the room was absolute. She thought of the chairman, the anonymous businessman in Dubai, and the emerald dress. She had let her mother die alone for a life that was now killing her. She graduated eventually. She stood on the university stage, her first-class degree in hand, a brilliant mind trapped in a compromised body. While the other graduates cheered, Simi looked into the distance, a ghost in a crowd of the living. She stands on her balcony now, looking over the Lekki link bridge. She is dressed in a gold gown. Clutching a cocktail she can barely taste and medication she has to take forever. Below, she sees the SUVs pulling up to the curb, and young girls, eyes bright with the same hunger she once had, climbing inside. She wants to scream a warning, to tell them that the designer labels are just colorful bandages on a terminal wound. But she stays silent, watching the cycle repeat, a queen of a kingdom built on ashes, forever haunted by the mother she forgot and the life she can't get back. A ghost in a luxury apartment, clutching a degree that can't buy back her health or her mother's life. 5 years have passed. The penthouse in Lekki has long since seen a new tenant, another girl with a different name but the same hungry eyes. Simi's name is no longer whispered in the VIP lounges or toasted at champagne brunches. In Lagos, you are only as relevant as your last appearance, and Simi had become a ghost long before she left the city. She lives now in a small, quiet house on the outskirts of a different town, far from the neon lights and the judgment of the village. The gold gowns and designer bags were sold off one by one, not for luxury, but for the antiretroviral drugs that keep the light in her eyes from flickering out completely. She works as a tutor for university students. Her first-class degree finally serving a purpose beyond vanity. She sits across from young girls who complain about their locked portals and their broken laptops, and she sees herself in every one of them. She sees the moment the emerald dress is offered. She sees the moment the resistance begins to erode. Every Sunday, she visits a small, unmarked plot of land where she planted a garden. She talks to her mother there. She doesn't talk about the money or the chairman. She talks about the students she helped that week. She talks about the girl she convinced to stay in the library instead of getting into the black SUV at the gate. Simi is thinner now, her beauty no longer the sharp, aggressive weapon it once was. It has softened into something weary and wise. She doesn't own a mirror anymore, she doesn't need to. She knows exactly who she is. She is the woman who paid for a life with her soul and spent the rest of it trying to buy it back, one honest day at a time. The debt is high, and the interest is steep, but for the first time in her life, Simi is no longer running. She is finally, hauntingly, free.